Hi, everyone. Welcome to the show. I'm Dr. Nicole, and on today's episode, we're talking about how parents and professionals can best support kids on the autism spectrum, specifically the mindsets that support positive outcomes for kids. And we're going to be talking about this from two different perspectives. Dr. Temple Grandin is on the show today to share her perspective as an autistic adult. And Dr. Debra Moore is also with us to talk about her perspective as a psychologist who spent her career working with autistic kids and young adults. This combination of experiences and ideas is really unique and important, and I'm honored to have them both here with us today. Let me tell you a little bit more about them. Dr. Temple Grandin is a professor of animal science at Colorado State University. She had no language until age 4, and good teachers and her mother helped her develop her strengths. She has a successful career as both a designer of livestock handling systems and as a scientific researcher. She also lectures widely on her experiences with autism. She has written many books. Some of them include Emergence, labeled Autistic, Thinking in Pictures, and The Autistic Brain. Dr. Debra Moore is a psychologist with extensive experience helping children, teens, and adults on the autism spectrum. She practiced for over 30 years in the Greater Sacramento area. During that time, she served as president of the Sacramento Valley Psychology Association and director of Fall Creek Counseling Associates. She co-authored The Loving Push: How Parents and Professionals Can Help Spectrum Kids Become Successful Adults, with her co-author Temple Grandin. Their second book together is out right now, and it's called Navigating Autism: 9 Mindsets for Helping Kids on the Spectrum. And we're going to be diving into talking about that together today. Temple and Debra, welcome to the show. It's so wonderful to have you both here.
Great to be here.
So I would love to start with just having each of you share a bit of your story for our audience, for people who aren't aware of you and your work. And then we're going to dive into talking about this topic today of how we can best support kids on the spectrum. So Temple, I'd love to start with you and just have you share a bit about your experience and your story.
Well, I'm Temple Grandin. I'm a professor of animal science at Colorado State University. And when I was 4, I had no speech. Fortunately, I got really good speech therapy very young. So by the time I was 4, I started to get speech, had all the classical symptoms of autism. Later on got fully diagnosed as being autistic. I can't emphasize enough the importance of early intervention. I was in speech therapy by age 2. Lots of 2.5 actually, lots of emphasis on turn-taking games. These kids have to learn how to wait and take turns. I had great elementary school teachers. My ability in art was always encouraged by my mother. You know, you want to take something a kid's good at, work on building on that strength. I had a fabulous science teacher when I was in high school because I was a bored student. And he got me interested in studying because studying was a pathway to a goal. I've designed equipment for the livestock industry all over the world. In fact, if you go out and have some beef, there's a good chance it was handled in one of my systems.
And I've heard you talk often about the important role that that your mom played in having expectations for you, in moving you forward, and we'll get into some of that and lots of other things about your experience. Debra, let's talk a little bit about you and your background and what brings you to this work today.
Sure. I was a psychologist in Sacramento, California for 35 years. I am now retired from clinical practice, and I'm devoting all of my time to writing about autism. And I came to love the specialty of autism because I found that my clients and families who were struggling with this were really some of the strongest advocates that I've ever come across, and some of the most patient and courageous and tireless folks. So I have a great deal of admiration, and I have always been someone who believes that differences are just part of a person. And if we understand each other, as Temple has said in many of her talks and in her book, it takes all kinds of minds.
All kinds of minds, for sure. And I think there is more acknowledgement of that, and we're moving forward with that. Certainly the field is much different than it was 25 years ago when I started doing work with these kinds of populations. So hopefully we're continuing to move that way of thinking forward. I'd like to we're going to get into the book that you have out now and mindsets, but I'm curious to hear from each of you what you think are some of the maybe common ways of thinking or myths, or maybe common things that are done that actually are not helpful to kids and to young adults or adults on the autism spectrum. Things that maybe people are well-intentioned with, but actually end up creating problems. And whoever wants to start, go
I'd like
for
to start on that. I think there's a problem with some parents overprotecting, especially making the transfer from teenagers to full adulthood. We're doing really good with the little kids, but fall down with the teenagers, not learning shopping, not learning handling money. Now, one of the things that helped is I was brought up in the 50s, and grown-ups corrected kids everywhere they went. And then we had sit-down meals. And when I did something like stir my drink with my finger, mother didn't scream no. She said, use the spoon. She gave the instruction. Kids had much more formal instruction in manners and things like this. On the job front, we're really falling down. Because I have a lot of granddads that come up to me, and that granddad will tell me that he figured out he was autistic when the kids got diagnosed, and granddaddy had a paper route at age 11. I'd like to get that transfer to work finished before high school. And autism is so variable. You're going from someone who never learns to speak, that maybe can't dress themselves, to somebody that should be working for Silicon Valley company. There's someone like Elon Musk, who has come out on Saturday Night Live, that he's on the spectrum. So you're going from Elon Musk, somebody can't dress themselves, and people tend to get too locked into the labels. Now, one thing that helped Elon Musk was learn how to work at a really young age, was out selling video games rather than playing them. That's being an entrepreneur. Exposed to lots of travel, exposed to tools. He also learned how to work at a really young age.
I agree. I think that issue of work and focusing on that and what the rest of a child's life is going to be is so important. And I find so many parents who say that they just feel like the rug got pulled out from under them as soon as their child finished 12th grade or formal schooling, and now they don't know where to turn. Their kids don't have skills for what to do, even kids who maybe graduated with a regular diploma. So I think that's a really important point, where we have a big gap in services and in what we're focusing on and prioritizing for kids as they get older.
The other thing we got to do is look for things in the neighborhood, where I ask parents of maybe a 15-year-old or 16-year-old, I want to get them in a volunteer job at age 11. That could be a church or a community center. I know COVID's thrown a monkey wrench into some of this stuff, but they've got to learn how to do a task on a schedule outside the family. And we've got to find substitutes for the old paper routes, getting jobs. Let's work on the back door. Half of all good jobs are back door. I say to parents, who do you know that owns a shop? And they go, somebody's got a little real estate office over here, and they could help out there. Or somebody, we can get them into the auto parts store. It's important to get into a job that does not have a lot of multitasking. I would not stick them on the takeout window at McDonald's. That I would not do.
Yeah, agreed. Okay. Deborah, how about for you? Things that you have found are either common ways of thinking that are actually unhelpful, or myths, or just misguided things that we do as parents or professionals?
Well, I agree totally with everything that Temple said. And I think we tend to divide artificially adolescence and adulthood and childhood, and as these three groups of time. And we can't wait. Like you said, the parents feel like the rug is pulled out from underneath them. That happens when not only resources aren't there, but it also happens when we've expected this end point and beginning point. And if we can move away from that and see it as continual, and realize that if your child's going to be able to work, or even if they're not, if they're going to maybe live in a residential facility, many of the skills are not technical skills. their daily life skills. And those start at the very beginning in a step appropriate to the age. So if you're going to be able to work and maybe say you're going to work in IT, well, just as important as your IT knowledge is, do you know how to take care of your hygiene? Do you know how to greet someone? Do you know how to ask for help? Do you know how to take turns? That starts with a toddler. Do you know how to accept criticism? Do you know how to make a mistake and keep going? Or do you freeze and stop and get anxious? That's a problem for a lot of our kids, being a perfectionist. So I think all of that preparation needs to be looked at through a filter of a continual journey, not these transitions so much. And that helps a lot. The other thing I would say is we've gotten much better. Like you said, when you were in school, when I was in school, we weren't taught about autism. We were told we would never encounter someone with autism, which is, we know now, ridiculous. But as we've gotten better with labels, sometimes we've put too much emphasis on them, in my opinion. Labels are wonderful. They're necessary. We need to get them as soon as possible so that we can access resources. But a child is a child. A kid's a kid. And that percentage of them that is just a kid is much bigger than their autism.
I'm curious, Temple, what you think, one of the things that I see around this issue, and I think Deborah just said it really well, of looking at it as a continuum of developing, not as this one transition point. One of the things that I have seen happen over the last 20 years is much more of an emphasis for parents and professionals on getting kids through the academics or the typical, system of education. And often then so much attention I find is put on what classes kids are in and getting them through, those types of things, that it doesn't leave time, energy, or any focus on these other really important skills that the two of you are talking about. I'm wondering, do you agree with that? Do you have a different perspective?
I'm sorry to interrupt. This is one of my problems. I got a slow processing speed and I can't time. And it's still a problem that I have. Yeah. And I think it's a big problem. I see that all the time. And not learning life skills. The other thing I think has been really bad, and it's another reason why grandmother has a good job, is they've taken all the hands-on classes out of the schools. Yeah. Art, sewing, woodworking, theater, auto shop, welding. Because when I was out in the construction sites and we were putting in equipment, I worked with talented people that were either autistic, dyslexic, or ADHD. And they're not getting replaced. And the other big problem is, I'm not saying everybody with autism should go into the skilled trades, but for some kids, it's the way to go, high-end skilled trades. Now, there's three kinds of thinking methods. There's visual spatial, which is mathematical. Then there's object visualizer, which is me, thinking in pictures. Can't do algebra. That's screening me out of a lot of things. And word verbal thinker. And a lot of really good skilled tradespeople that can fix any mechanical thing, people that might have 25 patents. I've worked with these people, and they would be diagnosed as autistic today. So taking that stuff out has been really bad. But the other thing is just not learning working skills. They're not the same skills as academic skills, because you can have a person that might, I know of a lady who got a degree of electrical engineering and computer science, got her dream job. And she quit it because she just didn't like it. And I think the problem was she hadn't learned how to work. That even in the best jobs, there's going to be some grunt work you don't really want to do. Or something you got to do you think stupid or something. Sometimes you just have to do it.
Yeah, I think that's so true. Those, sometimes we refer to those as soft skills, or, those sort of all of the things that both of you have talked about that are not the technical how to do the actual work, but are all the other pieces that are necessary for success in the working world. I think that's so true. Let's shift gears a little bit, because I know that both of you are very passionate about building on and focusing on strengths and interests that these kids have, and that can be a real pathway towards helping them as they move forward in their lives. So I I'd like for you to talk about how can parents, and secondarily teachers and but how can parents really emphasize and focus on those strengths and those interests? What are some effective ways to do that?
Well, let's just take in my case, my ability in art showed up when I was about 7 or 8 years old. Mother always encouraged that. And she encouraged me to do lots and lots of different kinds of art. Otherwise, I would have just done a horse head over and over again. And she encouraged me to, broaden that. Now, I want to differentiate between an ability or a strength and an interest. Horses are an interest. Art is a strength. I'm seeing people mixing up those two things. And she encouraged drawing a whole horse. Then you could draw maybe a place you might ride to. In other words, take that interest and broaden it. And then another kid, it might be math. And you could, let's say you like horses or cars, then you can do some mathematical things with horses or cars. You want to broaden. But knowing the difference between an ability, which would be something like visual thinking or math or music or dance even, is different than an interest. Like I like cars or I like to read about astronauts. Those would be interests.
Yeah, I think that's actually a really important distinction. I'm glad that you brought that up. Deborah, your thoughts on that?
One other thing that I think is important for parents is to realize, because some parents will say, well, my kid's really not interested in anything at all. Your kid can't get interested in something if they're not exposed to it. So while I have a lot of empathy for parents who are so busy and so tired, it's really going to pay off to expose your kid to lots of different experiences. And it can be something very simple. It can be going down to the ice cream store in town and letting them see the machinery, letting them open a freezer, an industrial freezer, and peek inside. People will let you do those sorts of things if you ask. Taking them to any and every museum or even parks and learning a little bit about history to see if they're interested in that, or taking them to a railroad and letting them talk to the conductor for 5 minutes, taking them on a factory tour, taking them to a cultural event, an arts performance. You don't know what your kid might be interested in. It might not be something you're interested in. So you have to think outside your own box as well.
I totally agree with that, because you look into the careers of a lot of people, even someone like Michelangelo, dropped out of school at age 12. He was exposed to art. Every cathedral was commissioning it. And he was also exposed to the tools for making stonework art. You can't get interested in something you don't get exposed to. And that's another reason why I think taking out so many of they call the hands-on classes out of the schools has been just such a bad thing to do.
Yeah, I agree. I'm curious what you would say to parents who their response to this is, well, the only thing my kid is interested in is video games. That's what he or she just wants to do all the time. That's what they are absorbed with, and that's the only interest they have.
Well, sometimes they just get addicted to that, and you've got to work on replacing it with something else. I've talked to 3 different families where their young adult was addicted to video games. And they weaned them off the video games with car mechanics. I just think it's interesting that 3 of them was car mechanics. So they were probably my kind of mind. If the kid's good at math, if it was a math kid, or good at music, then I'd want to try to gradually replace the video game with music or with math. You have to replace it with something else. The other thing I want to do is not allow these addictions to get this bad. Now, there's some kids that get socialization and friends who games where they talk to each other. I don't want to take that away, but you can't do that for 8 hours a day. And because what I'm seeing is they're not having good outcomes. They're ending up on a disability check and not working. And then another kid, they get them out working, they get them out doing things. Then the mom says, oh, I'm so happy you got my kid out. You convinced me to get my kid out doing things. And he's got a job. He bought a house. I think he's going to get married. Wonderful. That's a good outcome.
Yeah. Deborah, thoughts on that from the whole video game interest obsession sort of thing?
Oh, yeah. I'm going to go out on a limb and put out a very strong opinionated statement. And that is that probably 99% of the parents I talk to, in my opinion, underestimate how dangerous video games are. They are addicting. Just from a neurological standpoint, those designers put billions of dollars into making them addictive. The designers themselves, and we talk about this in our books, the designers, they don't let their kids play. The Silicon Valley executives know how dangerous this is. We've had, in our previous book, The Loving Push, we talked to a mom whose son suicided, and that came from an addiction to the video games, where he was just getting more and more out of touch with reality and got a big disappointment, and he couldn't stand up to it. We know that the brain on video games, I'm not talking about an hour a day, but I'm talking about the kid who that becomes so important that they have a meltdown when you take it away, when they don't have other interests, when they start avoiding the family. We know that their brains look like the brains of heavy drug addicts. It's really, really important. You've got to replace the activity. You can't go cold turkey. That's really dangerous. Just like a drug, that's really dangerous. You've got to get your kid out there and get them interested in something else.
Yeah,
well, I got some other books, The Outdoor Scientist right here. Get them outside, looking at the stars, studying animal behavior. I've been studying the crows in my neighborhood right now. And another book, Calling All Minds, my childhood project books. We've got kids today that have never made a paper snowflake like this. They've never made that. They've never made a paper airplane. And I was just shocked when within the last few months, I had a teacher ask me, well, what's going to happen to a kid's self-esteem if he makes a paper snowflake and it fell apart? I said, you get another piece of paper out of the printer, you try again, and then maybe you look it up on YouTube. I'm going, you've got to be kidding. And I think some of the problems today with kids being afraid to make a mistake go back to not doing any hands-on things. And I did a book signing for Calling All Minds about 3 years ago, big auditorium, 20-30% of the elementary school kids there, and there was a whole bunch of them that never made a paper airplane.
Yeah, there's been such a tremendous shift just culturally in terms of what kids' time and attention is focused on in general. And then you add on top of it the challenges of, kids with autism, kids with ADHD, kids with maybe brains that are more vulnerable to getting sucked into that, whether it's as a coping tool or, whatever it might be. But I'm seeing the same thing both of you are talking about, which is parents often don't realize until their kids reach young adulthood how problematic that has been for their child's development, exposure. And then, if people think it's tough to deal with the video game challenges when their kid is 5, that does not look any better at 25.
Another thing I would say is we've become accustomed to, almost without thinking about it, just handing a child, even a baby, a screen in order to soothe them. And it's understandable because it is that's the whole point of it being addicting. It's very compulsive to look at that screen. We all know that. We all spend too much time, waste time on the computer. Kids don't have the breaks that we have. They're going to go down that path, most of them. So when you hand a toddler a screen, make sure that you're not doing it as a substitute for good self-soothing, self-regulating skills. Those need to be taught explicitly to every child, but especially to autistic children who have greater sensory sensitivity, greater anxiety. They're struggling with self-regulation pretty much every day. They need skills. It can look like the screen provides that. It doesn't. It adds one more problem.
Well, with me, when I was a little kid, we did a lot of board games. Now, if you did something with a game on a phone and you passed the phone around physically passed the phone around, then you would be turning it into an interactive thing with other people. But these little autistic kids, they need to be doing stuff with people. And I know we got busy parents, but I'm not seeing good results, because when I'm talking here on the fully verbal end of the spectrum, when they get in the early 20s, there's two paths. They were working and then get out and have a life. I've had parents say to me, "Oh, he got a job at an ice cream parlor," and he just blossomed. And ice cream parlors are good because you make one ice cream cone or one shake at a time. You don't have so much multitasking. So there's been some really good success there. And the other one, they'll come up very sheepishly to me and said, "What do I do with a 22-year-old who's playing video games 10 hours a day?" And the one bright spot I saw was the weaning off with car mechanics, because I think my kind of mind, it gets addicted. I don't have any of this stuff. Okay, when I review the latest video games just to see what they are, I look at YouTube videos of them. I won't have this stuff on my computer, because one time I played a video game and I thought I played it for 30 minutes. I played it 4 hours, and I go, this stuff will not be on my computer or on my phone. Because I don't want to get addicted to it.
Yeah.
I'll look at the game on YouTube where it shows a movie trailer of a game. So I get an idea of what a game is about, parents, that I'll do. But let's look at some other things we can do. Minecraft's a big game. One mom had this brilliant idea of going to the lumberyard and having them cut up some 2x4s and have the kids sand them and paint them from Minecraft blocks in the driveway in their kid in the neighborhood. How about getting all the Amazon boxes in the neighborhood and tape them up and paint them and have gigantic Minecraft blocks? And this is stuff that's not going to cost you anything. A little bit of paint and some tape. You see, now when I, as a visual thinker, when I think about this, I see it.
Yeah.
And these are things that we can do. All the projects in my books are cheap, inexpensive things. I mean, like paper snowflakes, making sandcastles if you go to the beach, studying leaves, studying plants budding. Things bird watching. I mean, I'm amazed what some of the crows are doing. They'll drink water on the side of the road, but they won't drink the pothole water. Would that be for a kid to live in their own neighborhood? Now, as I talk about it, I see the crows.
And it strikes me what you're really talking about, and I think what is really at the heart of this message is that parents and professionals, we need to be focused on engaging kids in real life, in the real world, in the world around them, helping them truly engage and develop resilience and skills around that. I mean, that's really at the heart of what I hear you talking about. Get them doing real things and immersed in activities of life.
Well, that's right. Now, let's talk a few little things about sensory stuff.
Yeah.
Okay, let's say my kid has a meltdown every time we go to Walmart. Well, one of the ways to help work on that is give them control, where we'll go into Walmart when it's not so busy. Or my kid hates automatic doors. Well, that's a visual sensitivity. Well, then go there when it's not busy and let the kid approach the door and control it. You can also do this with loud noises like hair dryers and vacuum cleaners, where you let the child turn on and off, let the kid play with it, where they control the dreaded noise. And that can sometimes help desensitize some of those things.
Yeah.
And my mother used to take me shopping when we called it marketing in the 50s. And, she'd have me go pick things out and put it in the basket. And you can also just work using speech and say, well, Daddy likes the cornflakes. Can you get the cornflakes and put them in the basket? I mean, making shopping an interactive experience. Learning how to talk to the clerks. I was buying things by myself when I was 7 and 8 years old. I had an allowance and I was taught to save money. 50 cents bought a lot in the 50s. I could get 5 comics, 10 candy bars, but if I wanted a 69-cent airplane, I had to save for 2 weeks. That's a really important lesson that I was learning as a very, very young child. And now it's going to be $5 at the dollar store. But it's the same idea. And these are not expensive or difficult things to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, agreed. Let's go into some of the mindsets that you talk about. You have your new book out about 9 mindsets for helping kids on the spectrum. And I would love for each of you to maybe just touch on 1 or 2 that you think are particularly important for parents to understand.
Well, we talk about the first mindset is seeing your child as a whole person. And that really is a thread that goes through all of the mindsets. And we give some very specific ways to help fight against putting the autism under too much emphasis, because we do it without meaning to sometimes, professionals as well as parents. And we give lots of examples of what it looks like in a family where you're putting the autism first and where you're putting the child first, so that people can really visualize it. One of the mindsets, and Temple probably can talk more about this, is preparing the child for the adult world, and we've touched on that a little bit. We also talk about what an evaluation is for a child if you regard that child as a whole child evaluation. It's different than some of the evaluations you get. It's much broader. The reports are different. They're geared towards not just a diagnosis, that's a given, but they're geared towards actionable results that parents can actually use and that the whole team can actually use. So we talk about how to make a team that works together, because so many times parents feel as though, well, I've got one therapist over here, I've got the teacher over here, I've got my mother-in-law over here telling me what to do. And how do you pull all of these people, family, neighbors, community members, professionals together so that you're on the same page and you base interventions on a true deep knowledge of that unique child?
Yeah. Wonderful. Temple, thoughts on a mindset or 2 that you cover in the book that you think are particularly important?
Well, I think developing strengths is something that's really important. And what a lot of people don't realize is that I'm seeing a lot of these brilliant kids getting screened out because they can't do algebra or some other thing. We need their skills. We're actually losing some manufacturing skills. We need these different kinds of diverse minds, and they have complementary skills when you're building something like a large food processing plant. My kind of mind does clever engineering and lays out the whole factory, and the mathematicians have to design stuff like boilers and refrigeration. The different minds are complementary, and you need to get the project done. You need all of them working together. Another thing that really helped me is my mother and a local elementary school worked together as a team. The rules were the same at home and school. If I had a tantrum, it's called a tantrum in the 50s. The rule was no television for one night. And I was only allowed an hour of TV a day. That's all I would allow for video games, hour a day. And it was very, objective. And they waited until I calmed down. The rules were really, really clear. And that was really helpful. Too often I'm hearing a parent will say, well, my kid's wonderful at home and horrible at school. Or I hear he behaves really well at school and terrible at home. Well, in this situation, the teachers and the parents are not on the same page. You need to find out what the school's doing, or the school needs to find out what the parents are doing and start doing the thing that works.
Mm-hmm. I think that idea of a team approach is so important, because so many of these kids do have a lot of professionals or adults involved in some way in their lives. And, I as you said, Deborah, really empathize with parents who feel like they're pulled in so many different directions with different opinions. And I also empathize with how that must feel to kids who are trying to navigate so many different approaches or ways that the adults in their world are handling things. And so this idea of really having a collaborative team effort, I think is so important.
Yeah, that's a really good point about how it affects the child as well. Maybe for your listeners, it would be helpful to know that one of the ways that the book is kind of set up is that it has three components. One, we give you information, but then we also give you lots of checklists and questionnaires to help you assess, that you can just go down, and you can also give those to teachers or to therapists so that everybody sees everybody's feedback. And then we have examples. Some of them are real with names changed, and some of them are common hypothetical examples so that you can really picture how a family would go about doing this one way, and then we compare it to doing it another way that might not be as helpful.
I think those practical examples are really beneficial for parents, especially to get an idea in their head of what this looks like in practice. I think that's really helpful. This issue that you raised about parents having the mindset of seeing the child, as a whole child, and not overemphasizing the label or the diagnosis. I'm curious what either of you or both of you say to people who maybe, I'm seeing this more in the neurodiversity movement, this idea of very much some people, some autistic people, some people with other diagnoses saying, no, this label does define me, this is who I am, and who might say, you know, when you're talking about viewing the whole child, that's discounting their autism or their label. I'm curious if you run into people who raise that with you, and
Yes.
what your thoughts are on that.
Yes, I have. And to me, autism is an important part of who I am, but a profession comes first, because what's given me a satisfying life is having interesting work to do. And some of the work I've been able to do, autism helped me do it, because I'm an extreme visual thinker. That really helped me with animal behavior, because people that are highly verbal have a hard time kind of understanding animals. That's what I talk about in my book, Animals in Translation. I discussed how that, being a visual thinker helped me. But it's, what I want to see is I want to see people be successful. And so there's some things you've got to do, to join the world. Like, you can't be a rude, filthy, dirty slob. That's one that you got to clean it up. Now, I have problems with wearing certain clothes, so I wear work clothes and good clothes that feel the same. I still have problems with multitasking. I have no working memory. I have to, when I learned math and borrowing and subtraction in third grade, if I'd been forced to do that in my head, I couldn't do it. If I hadn't been allowed to mark the paper, I would not be able to do it. I had some problems. We had a meeting yesterday, and we had a lot of people at different tables talking, and I have trouble with hearing when there's background noise. I still have those kinds of problems. So there's some stuff you got to do some accommodations. But on the other hand, I'm not going to be the social butterfly, because one problem I have is I simply can't follow those rapid conversations because my attention shifting is so slow. Now, professionally, working memory doesn't matter, because all I use is long-term memory, and I do design work. That doesn't load working memory. But I've always, my first book that I did back in the mid-'80s, Emergence, labeled autistic. I used that label from the beginning. And then my book, where I talk about the different kinds of minds, I call it the Autistic Brain. So I tended to go towards identity first language when I didn't even know that word identity first. And then the professionals were pushing against you saying person with autism. So what I've done on some of the stuff I write now is I just mix and match, because it's good. I've learned in writing that you want to not just keep using the same word all the time. It's bad writing. Okay, so I might say something's beautiful, and then somewhere else I'll say it's lovely. I won't use the word beautiful again, because I've learned that that's not good writing.
Yeah. Deborah, how about you, your thoughts on that, or if you've encountered people sort of challenging this idea of the whole child versus the label?
I have. recently I had a post, and it was a reprint of an article. I don't even remember what it was about, but it used the term children with autism. And someone on social media took great offense at that. And I get that. And I think part of that comes from a fear that there's that stigma, which has been with us for so long, is going to persist. And that the strengths, like Temple talked about, parts of her autism are what has made her stand out in her profession. It's a strength, it's a plus. But when we have a DSM that emphasizes deficits, it's a deficit model, it's good to be cautious and wary that we don't fall into deficit thinking. And I think folks who point that out to us, that's part of what their message is, and I respect that greatly. At the same time, this person who pointed that out was obviously angry about it. And I thought it's too bad that they actually, I don't think they even read the article. And it was a wonderful article that talked about how to help children. So I think we can realize that the autism is something we need to have a great deal of consideration and carefulness about, but we don't want to use an idiom, which throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, the other thing is things evolve. I mean, I've written my first book, Emergence, labeled Autistic, came out in the mid-'80s. So I've been writing for a long time. And the mistake I made early on was talking about that I was cured. I realized that's a mistake. I would never write that now.
Yeah.
Because I'm still very autistic. I still have problems with multitasking. I still have some problems with the sound sensitivity. Social chit-chat conversations go by too fast. We were in a meeting yesterday with a bunch of other people, and we were doing interesting chit-chat conversations at tables about trips we'd been on. I couldn't hear the other people talking. And that is something that's still a problem. So those kind of activities are not that fun for me if I can't hear them. And you see, and then people are talking about masking. Well, you might be in a situation where you're sensory overloaded. I fidget with my hands. Well, I was taking a pen at this meeting and I was doing some things with the pen like this, but I wasn't knocking it on the table where people would hear it. Do a fidget thing that doesn't bother people. In fact, it's interesting, all the fidget toys you can get now. You can get the truck I learned to drive on. You can get oil field equipment. It's amazing what you can get as fidget toys because everybody seems to like to have them. Well, you can have that, mess with it under the table. So you find something, because we had a day-long big faculty meeting yesterday. It was really good, in-person faculty meeting, and I was fidgeting with the pen, but I made sure I didn't make any noise with it. You see, that's where you try to do something that doesn't bother other people, and
that still meets your needs.
Yeah, and I cannot multitask. There's certain jobs I just am not going to do. There's plenty of other jobs I can do super well, like design work.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you raising that point that, in your writings and in your own evolution as a person, that as time has gone on, that you've been able to shift some of your ways of thinking about that. Like you said, you wouldn't write cure now. And
I would never write that.
Right.
The other mistake I made when I wrote original version of Thinking in Pictures, I did this back in 1995, is I made the mistake of saying that everybody with autism was a visual thinker like me. That's wrong. Right. I have now, and when I did the Autistic Brain in 2013, I said, well, it was wrong. And I read some reviews of my book and it was wrong. And now what the thing that tends to be true is the thinking tends to be more specialized, good at one thing, really bad at something else, where most people are more mixtures. But it was just wrong. And I didn't know that. And I changed that.
Which is really the mark of growth as a human being. That's the journey we all should be on, right? That as we learn more and know better, then we change and we do better. And I think that's an important message for all of the parents and professionals listening, that we all do the best we can with what we know at the time. And then as we have new information, new understanding, we can shift and do better, and that's okay. That's part of the process. We can't be expected to know it all and get it all right immediately, but we should be committed to continuing our own learning and growth. And that's why I really appreciate people like the two of you who take the time to write about your experiences and provide learning opportunities for parents and for professionals. And so as we're wrapping up, I would love for you to share the title of the book, where people can get the book, and any parting thoughts around the message of the book.
Okay, Deborah, why don't you talk?
Sure. The book is called Navigating Autism, 9 Mindsets for Helping Kids on the Spectrum. And it's published by Norton Publishers. You can get it directly from the publisher. Most people are going to just go on the Amazon and get it, but you can order it from any bookstore. Or if your library doesn't have it, some libraries will get it, but if yours doesn't, you can always ask your librarian to order it for you as well. Most of the time they will. And it will hopefully give you some new ways of looking at things and make life a little bit smoother for you and for your child.
Wonderful. Is there a website, Deborah, where people can go to learn more about you or your work, or Temple for you? Is there a website? Because I know that people are thinking, where can I go to learn more about you and your previous books and what you're doing?
Well, there's templegrandin.com. That's my autism site. And there's a lot of free information on that and links to books. And then if you're interested in livestock, I have my livestock website, grandin.com.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Thank you so much to both of you for being here today, for sharing all of this wonderful wisdom and these strategies and techniques that we all can use. Really appreciate your time, and want to encourage all of you who are listening to get this new book, learn some new things, put some of these things in practice with your own children, with the children and the adults that you work with. And thanks to all of you for being here. We'll catch you back here next time.